It's been a shitty few weeks, hasn't it? So, we voted for Brexit. Brilliant. I've taken the last week or so to calm down and be less angry, but if you want an idea of how important us remaining in the EU was to me, then listen to this reaction when I found out that my podcast co-host was going to be voting leave.
So I'm potentially going to vote leave, which is going to upset you.
No!
I'm going to explain my reasoning why.
No!
I have to. This is not proving a productive conversation.
No! I also went live on my Facebook page when we found out early on Friday morning that we were going to be leaving the EU, and yeah.
It's really hard for me not to feel resentment, but older people in certain parts of the UK have basically just thrown the rest of us under the bus.
Quite frankly, you know what? You all said you wanted bloody change. Well, you've got it now, haven't you? David Cameron promptly resigned on Friday morning after his side of the referendum lost out, and now we're going to have like a caretaker government for 3 months while the Tories, a membership of 150,000 people, which is like 0.2% of the British population, are going to decide who our next Prime Minister is. Great! Running to be our next Prime Minister, we have a man who's happy to take money from organisations that back gay conversion therapy, another man who for some reason everybody seems to think would actually quite like to, allegedly, get in on some of that conversion therapy, an ex-banker who for some reason doesn't want to release all of her tax forms. Oh, I wonder why. An evil, like, cyborg teddy bear who is very happy to stab everybody in the back and has made our politics seem more like House of Cards than ever before, and the least evil option who, when you actually take a look at her, is still pretty evil. So I'm ecstatic. What's meant to be our country's opposition are currently having the wettest and dampest political coup that I've ever possibly seen. They're basically like, oh Jeremy, could you possibly, maybe, perhaps think about leaving? That'd be ever so handy for us. I reckon he's gonna get on the ballot. I reckon he's gonna run and win the leadership election, and then the Labour Party are just going to dissolve in front of our eyes. And I'm super worried about that because we need an effective opposition in order for government to work properly. Even at Prime Minister's Questions, the PM said this.
Look, if he's looking for excuses about why the side he and I were on about the referendum, frankly, he should look somewhere else. And I have to say to the honourable gentleman, he talks about job insecurity and my 2 months to go. It might be in my party's interest for him to sit there. It's not in the national interest, and I would say, for heaven's sake, man, go!
No, I don't think that David Cameron said that because of political posturing. I think that he genuinely wants there to be an effective opposition, and I'd quite like that as well, especially as there's going to be a really undemocratic process for choosing our next Prime Minister. Only 150,000 people are going to choose who's going to run the bloody country. Right now, to be completely honest, I just wish I was Scottish, because that part of the world seems to really have their political shit together. Let's not talk about the Labour Party of Scotland, because anomaly. Nicola Sturgeon, I think, has come out really well of this, as she was the only political leader that seemed to have any plan post-Brexit at all. Even UKIP, the Leave campaign, Leave Tories, none of them have any idea what they want the country to look like now that we've chosen to leave the EU. It's loco. This is crazy. You know how crazy this is, right? The vast majority of people that voted to leave the EU are those who have been disillusioned with politics for decades, let alone the last election cycle. There was a really good brief film from Sheena Samaria where she went up to the Midlands where the majority of people, like something like 70 or 80% of people there voted to leave.
You'll get reporters come to these areas and the first thing people might mention is immigration because it's been absolutely fed to them day in and day out. Then when they actually get to the bones of what's happening and talk about the decimation and the lack of hope in these areas, that is retracted and cut out of any footage, so it portrays them as racist in the way that they want to portray us.
What you see there is a culture that has lost all of its primary industry. A lot of the working class communities have been decimated by the fact that working class factories have been closed. Then you see the fact that the people in Westminster don't seem to be representing them I'm a fan of Ed Miliband. I think that he was actually quite nice, but how the hell does a guy who was essentially privately educated in London, the son of an academic socialist, how does he represent Doncaster? A lot of what I've been thinking about over the last week plus has been basically, what the fuck can I do? And I don't fall into the camp of people who think that we should just ignore the referendum, even though there are grounds to do that, like it's not constitutionally binding in any way, shape or form. What I do think there's a case for is when our terms of leaving the EU are negotiated and we'll have an idea of how much it's going to cost us in terms of that £350 million a week, which was a load of fucking bullshit anyway. We'll know where we stand with freedom of movement, we'll know where we stand with how influential we're going to be within the European Union still, even though we're going to be leaving it. Once those terms are negotiated, I think that we then have a case for the British people to decide. Again, I don't really like the idea of another referendum, but what I do like the idea is of us having a general election to decide who it is that instigates Article 50, if we want to actually instigate Article 50. But what we need there is gumption within the parties in order to say, hey, this was a mistake, we shouldn't be doing this. We've seen that with the Liberal Democrats. The Greens are asking for a progressive coalition between Plaid Cymru, Labour, the Greens and the SNP and the Lib Dems. I would support something along those lines. But what I think that we need to be really aware of is that our country has changed forever. I posted something on my personal Facebook like the day after or 2 days after the referendum result, and I wrote something along the lines of, well done, you all voted for getting your country back, well I feel like I've lost mine. And that idea of the country that I thought that I belonged to, that idea of Britain, I've never really identified as English particularly well. That idea of the Britain that I feel part of, I'm going to continue to fight for that. I will fight for that. Whether that's through taking the piss out of politicians on the internet, or whether that's through activism that I am signing up to. As long as we make our voices heard, which young people aren't particularly good at, really low turnout in this referendum, we could have swung it. Really disappointed. I think that we need to pull our socks up and get to work and make sure our country is still our country. Lol, funny video, lol. We've been talking about this in depth on my podcast, The Right Dishonourable. Please go over and listen to that. Subscribe to it, leave it a review, give it some stars. I'm really proud of that podcast at the moment. Please check it out. Like or share this video if you want to give some people a kick up the ass, because I think that's what we need. And I will see you very soon. I have been Rhyme with Oranges. Toodaloo.